What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and in this quick Darkest Dungeon 2 guide, we're going to talk about 5 common new player mistakes. These are ones that I've made, these are ones that I've seen other people make, and they've also talked about them in various Discord servers that I am a part of. So, we're going to help you avoid making these mistakes, and that way you can be better. Alright, enough terrible jokes, let's get into it. The first mistake that I see most new players make is not using combat items correctly. Combat items are equipable, and if you look in your inventory, they have their own tab, which is really nice, very helpful to see them if you have a bunch or even a couple. And when you use them in combat, they are free actions. They do not take your turn. So this means that they can have some really cool interactions or effects, especially if you time them correctly. The first part of this mistake is you just have to equip the combat items. Sometimes you don't. Everyone forgets at some point, so don't feel bad about it, but make sure you put the frickin' thing on. Next is make sure you're giving them to the right person. Not everyone needs a blind cure combat item because they're not usually attacking, or blind doesn't seem to hit them that often. Likewise, you don't need bleed resist powder if you're in an area that does a bunch of blight. So always make sure you're checking in with your combat items and rotating them out if they're not meeting your needs. What's really good about combat items isn't so much the niche strategies they enable or the very potent direct strategies that you can do as well. It's that they have a lot of interactions with tokens. If it is a offensive combat item, something you throw at the enemy, that can help you get through your own blind tokens, the enemy's dodge tokens, or other tokens that may be present. And sometimes this can be really good because if the combat item is not worth that much to you in that moment, and you want to get rid of your blind so you can hit them with your big attack afterwards, then it's actually okay to toss the combat item, get rid of the blind, and then make sure you hit the enemy. Number 2, poor routing. So routing, or traveling, or whatever term you want to use for it, is you picking the regions, the biomes, and the roads that you go through to get to the mountain. There are a few mistakes that are easy to make with routing, and the first is picking the correct region. Sometimes your team is not good for the region you want to go to. Once you've selected a region, make sure that you choose good roads and nodes to take along the way. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the road, so when you first go into the zone, the whole map lights up as it goes scouting, and it shows you everything that's on the road and all the stops, which are called nodes. And you want to make sure that you're picking routes that aren't too dangerous, but also still give you a lot of stuff. Another thing to consider when picking your route is all of the other things that are on the roads themselves. If you see the rough patches, which are the orange symbols with the wagon wheel, those break your wagon tokens, or the wheel tokens I should say, and there are traps that break your wagon's armor tokens, and you don't want to run into too many of these too quickly because you won't be able to fix them in time, and you might get attacked by bandits. The next hazard to consider with roads themselves is loathing. This is shown as a blue, flamey, inky looking token on the map, and loathing can be really dangerous. If you max it out, there are dire consequences that I won't spoil directly in here, but if you want to know what they are, ask in the comments or Discord or whatever. The important thing is to not max out loathing. You can lower loathing by taking fights at nodes or lairs. You cannot lower it through road fights, which means that you should be taking at least a couple fights on your journey at nodes and eventually a lair. Mistake number 3, this one is coming back from Darkest Dungeon 1, and that is being too reactive instead of proactive. Reactive playstyles are ones where you mainly focus on healing and being defensive and slowly killing the enemy. The reason reactive play isn't that strong in this game is because your heals primarily are limited. Most heals are limited, or they have big cooldowns, and they have thresholds, and they only heal a certain amount, so you can't sit there and stall and heal yourself back up to full before the fight ends. However, road travel healing is also pretty powerful, so you don't really need to sit there and stall, which means you should be proactive. Proactive strategies are ones where you're being aggressive with the enemy, you're trying to weaken them through debuffs or kill things quickly, like focus fire a certain tough enemy, and this way you mitigate the damage that you're taking in return. It's easier said than done, of course, but ideally you want to be trying to kill the enemies quickly instead of reacting to them, because mathematically the tools don't match up in your favor. The general pace of a fight in terms of how fast you should be ending it if you're being proactive, excluding bosses, is about 4 turns. The reason this is 4 turns is because ideally you want to kill at least 1 enemy per turn to help reduce the damage you're taking. As always though, easier said than done, exceptions noted, but again, these are the general guidelines. If you end up killing no enemies on turn 1, but then kill 2 on turn 2, that's perfectly fine, as long as you're going quickly through the battle. The other reason you want to be proactive too is that a lot of the enemies just do really dangerous things the longer they're alive. Some enemies transform, some can hit you with some devastating attacks, and you want to make sure that you are controlling them or killing them or preparing for these situations instead of just reacting to it a couple turns later when it happens with your limited healing. Mistake number 4 could be its own video easily, and that is inventory management. So there's a lot of stuff to do with your inventory, and it can seem a bit overwhelming at first between your 2 physical currencies, which are relics, aka gold, and baubles, which are weird knickknacks like sea stars. Those take up space, all of your combat items take up space, your in items take up space, and your trinkets and wagon gear also take up space. So those bag slots get pretty competitive. The reason inventory management is very important is because sometimes you'll need to carry something important for an extended period, but primarily there are things you can pick up on the road. So if you run over little piles of debris, these are in every single zone in the game, you sometimes randomly get some extra loot. It could be a combat item, it could be a couple gold, and sometimes it's nothing, but these are all pretty important. If you have no empty space in your bags, when you run over something and pick it up, you won't get to keep it. It'll just flash at the top of the screen, and then you will immediately and automatically discard it. So that means when you're driving around, you should at least keep 1 or 2 spaces open if you can, just in case you find something. The final tip is actually a pretty big one, and it's something new that came in this game that wasn't really in the first game, and that is the academic view. If you are unfamiliar with it, the academic view is you being able to examine the monster and see what its abilities are. If you haven't fought the monster or if it hasn't used the ability in front of you before, it's going to show up as a question mark. The reason this is really important is because you can see the effect of the enemy's moves, where they can use the moves from, and what they target. So if you see where they are on the other side of the field, you can understand or at least have an educated guess on what attacks they may be using. It may be really fun to just slam buttons and watch big numbers pop up and stuff, but Darkest Dungeon does require at least a bit of strategy, and understanding what the enemies can do really helps you in that regard. Alright y'all, that's gonna do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and big shouts to my Discord for helping me put together this list and curate it a bit. You guys are awesome. Speaking of Discord, you should join it too. I put the link under every video that I make, so if you want to drop in to a cool and growing community, feel free to do so. And there's some other cool links in the box like Discord, I said Discord, and Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon. Sorry, that's an automatic way of me saying it, so if you want to check out all that stuff, go ahead. Otherwise, let me know what you're thinking down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.